there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Welcome to Sketchbook Sunday, and today we are going to paint Buttery Flaky Crust. I think it's so fun to paint pastries with lots of layers and interesting textures, and these raspberry turnovers that I found at the grocery store this week I thought would be excellent to paint, and they actually were vegan, so that just gave me some incentive to get them painted so I could try them. I'm starting off with a yellow ochre watercolor pencil, and I am just sketching in the basic shapes. I just want to kind of get a layout of how they're kind of arranged on the cutting board, and just kind of get an idea for where the filling is and where like kind of the buttery flaky crust is. And the buttery flaky crust, if you're from Maine, or actually you might have seen the Saturday Night Live skit, there was this really funny commercial for the restaurant Dysarts in Maine, and there was this older couple that was trying to say these lines, and the husband of this line, and he was just supposed to say buttery flaky crust, and he couldn't get the line out, and it was so funny. And they spoofed that on Saturday Night Live. So so if you ever get a chance to see either the real Dysarts commercial or the spoof on Saturday Night Live, it's kind of funny. It's just kind of like an older Maine couple that are it's just a riot. So anytime I see like a pastry with phyllo dough, I keep thinking buttery flaky crust, and the fact that poor man could not say the line. I'm using a variety of watercolors. I originally was going to use the leftover Joy Art watercolors I had on my glass palette, but then I also had the Jane Davenport neutral and brights on my table, and those worked out really well. So I just kind of started with leftovers in my glass palette there, and kind of crossed over to the Jane Davenport ones. Obviously, use whatever you have; it doesn't matter. Just whatever, get the colors that are going to work right for you. That little crimson pan there in the center of my Jane Davenport palette is actually an extra Cotman one, because and people like poo-poo the Cotman watercolors all the time. I'm so sick of hearing that. You know what? You can paint with whatever you want to. You can paint with whatever you have. You don't have to spend $1 million to get good quality paints. It is about the artist putting the time in more than the paint. I mean, granted, paint from the dollar store is not going to give you the same results as paint from an art store, but come on, use what you have fun. This is art. It's not, rocket science. We're here to have a good time and to, express ourselves creatively and bring some joy to the world. Don't complain about Cotman paints. I hear it all the time. I didn't mean to rant, guys. Sorry about that. I'm mixing ultramarine and burnt sienna for a lovely granulating gray. I am not trying for realism here. I am just, blocking in colors at this point. Now I'm going to dry everything so that I can add another layer. Now the neutral palette there, the Jane Davenport palette, was designed, I believe, more for like doing skin tones, but there's some really gorgeous neutrals there, like that Naples yellow type color. And I'm just using, I'm not calling them the names from the palette because I don't remember what they are. I'm using more common names that you would see like in an art supply store, or more of like an artist grade palette, just because that's what I'm more familiar with. So I'm using some kind of like burnt sienna or English red, like a PR 101 red, some yellow ochre, and some Naples yellow to get those beautiful crusty colors. That darker brown is more like a burnt umber, so if you're painting with a different set, that's a color that you'd be looking for there. And I'm using that to kind of cut through some of the neutral tones to give me the texture of the crust on the outside, following the contours of the rounded kind of pillow-like, because they're kind of pillowy, like buttery flaky crust, to kind of give it that volume. So when you use those curved lines, it gives you that that roundness and volume, because you want this to feel really light and flaky and fluffy. I'm grabbing my Arteza Real Brush pens because they're so transparent and intense and crisp that I know that I can go in with another layer of dark on the jelly or jelly filling type of stuff that's there. Now this is in my sketchbook, so I'm not worried about the markers fading. Generally, markers are going to fade on you because they're made with dyes. So if you're talking Copic markers, Zig markers, Arteza markers, most markers are going to fade. The only exceptions I know to that would be the Winsor & Newton pigment markers, which are an ethanol-based marker, like a solvent marker, and the Oh, they're watercolor markers, the Winsor Newton watercolor markers. Those are relatively light fast, but I really like these real brush pens, and since it's going to be closed in a sketchbook, I'm not going to worry about it. So I layered up different reds and purples to get that intense, transparent, deep color, and then I went in with a brown pen and started to do some of those shadows in between the layers of phyllo dough. So I wanted to get those crisp shadows in there, and I knew using that marker was going to be really good for this because I could keep those sharp edges. Make sure your paper's dry when you do this, or you're going to get some blurred edges, which you could clean up later with a colored pencil, but it's just a little bit easier for your planning as you're looking at your piece and working through it if you have that kind of divided up and nice and crisp from the get-go. But don't worry if you forgot to dry it and you got some fuzzy edges, you can bring it back, but I'll tell you it's just a little easier if you do it from the get-go. This peachy colored pen was great for kind of glazing over everything because these markers are transparent, obviously. Most markers are. And I'm able to kind of spread out some colors here and there. I'm able to pick up a little bit of the pink and move from the filling and move it here and there where I want more of a golden look. And it's just a nice way to kind of cross-pollinate your colors so you have a lot of harmony. Since I am going from different palettes and different mediums, having harmony is really important. Now I grabbed some of the white watercolor. I had some on my ceramic palette from earlier, and then also there's some in the cake there, and just to basically give the Buttery Flaky Crust a little bit more lightness, and because it is very, very light, both in color and in texture and in weight. So I just wanted to kind of go in there. And also on the top of the pastries, there's this kind of like sugary coating, and the bread is really light. I bought these a couple days ago, so I think they were kind of like I needed to paint them now or they were going to go to waste. So I think that the crust on the top was starting to get a little soft with the sugar. So I was trying to get that texture there with the white. And then I've got a little more Naples yellow to warm it up. Oddly enough, the color of the pastry, that kind of like off cream golden color, was difficult to capture. I kept finding that I was either getting it too monotone, I was very easily getting it too dark. So I do spend a lot of time adjusting the color on the bread. Now I'm drying it again so I can layer up a little bit more. And this time I'm going in with a white color pencil because I want to kind of reserve some of my light areas, like where the sugar I was talking about on the top of the crust, which is really light, and on some of those like little the ridges of the Buttery Flaky Crust. I can say it. I could have been there on the commercial saying the line. So I'm also using some cream there to just kind of just nice sharp cream pencil just to get those really light and delicate layers, and also to get some of the layers that are in the filling. You will see that there are like kind of some stained with the jam layers laying down in the filling, which is kind of a just interesting texture to draw. I think why I'm so into doing food lately, illustrating food, is that there's so many interesting textures, and I think you constantly need to be growing and challenging yourself and trying new things as an artist, or you're gonna get bored, you're gonna get stale. So like if you have one set of watercolors and that is all you have for art supplies, and you're feeling kind of like just stale, like I've done everything, everything's boring, I don't feel like, doing anything. Maybe you just need to change your subject matter. So if you're always doing landscapes, try still life, try flower, try portrait, try food illustration, try something different with the materials you have. If you always paint indoors from photographs, try going outside and painting from life, or try painting wildlife. Go sit outside and try to paint some birds or other, like your pets or people that are moving. That will give you a new perspective, something to try. And even if it's a hot mess and doesn't look good, when you go back to your table and you start working from reference photos again, you are going to be better because you've tried something different, you've grown as an artist, and you would have developed some new skills, and you'll probably be quicker since you've had to deal with like things that move or light that changes and things like that. So I'm using a round Aquilon brush by Roland Langnickel to dab in some details, and now I have gone to a white Posca paint pen. I'm having much more luck with these than white gel pens. I find that if they do dry a little bit, you can revive them. I've been able to refill them with opaque white acrylic paint, so they just seem to be a lot more sustainable than the white gel pens that might get clogged and then you can't revive them again. So that's kind of been one of my changes recently in like the last 6 months or so, has been using the Posca white extra fine paint pen rather than a gel pen. I haven't used the Sharpie paint pen. There's a Sharpie acrylic paint pen that a lot of people have been using, and I think you can find that at like any big box craft store. I haven't seen it myself, but I also haven't looked for it, but I'm pretty sure you can get that pretty easily in the United States. I had to order the Posca online on Amazon, but whatever, any white gel pen's fine. I just wanted to put that out there. And then to make some of the pastries feel a little bit more golden, I am using like a sunburst yellow type of pencil to just kind of warm it up. The pencils are semi-translucent, so you can very lightly color over areas with a color that you might think is too bright, and it will warm things up. And then I'm using a light gray because some of the highlights, especially in the filling itself, definitely have this gray cast, and I think it's because of the daylight bulbs that I use being cooler. They do reflect a little bit of a cooler light. And now I'm going in for my deepest darks with a black Prismacolor color pencil, and this is just for, you know, when I wasn't able to carve out a shadow any other way or get a division in color any other way, or I just need that super almost black shadow to glaze on top of like the filling. That's what I'm going in and doing there. Now, one thing I noticed with the white paint pen is that sometimes it seeps down into the layer of watercolor and is tinted, so I did go over some of the highlights I wanted to be really white because they had kind of gone pink as they dissolved into the watercolor. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're trying to highlight right away, sometimes those pens will mix in with what you have underneath. And then some nice medium brown for some of those shadows in the crevices of the Buttery Flaky Crust. And yeah, I'm just kind of bouncing around between my indigo and black, and just deepening any colors that need deepening. Also Tuscan red, that's a really nice shadow red color. I like Tuscan red and indigo, those two layered over each other for really dark, intense shadows. They work really well and they won't give you the black hole. But I find that with like a black colored pencil, as long as I've been using colored pencil, it doesn't seem to feel black holy like black paint does. So, you know, hey, old dogs can learn new tricks. I'm using some black pencil and I never really did that before. So never say never, my friends. If you want to add a little bit more shadow next to the object to give it some weight, you can do that with a dark gray pencil. This is a Cool Gray 70, I believe. And that pretty much does it. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I think it is fun, and this pastry did taste good. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy crafting!